to Siah, you know, can you share with us, perhaps give us an introduction to your center, the Southeast Asia Center of Asia Pacific Excellence? I believe it is also known as CCAPE. And I think more importantly, how it supports entrepreneurship in New Zealand. Shall we? The floor is yours.
Thanks, TJ. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Thanks, TJ, and thanks, Julia and Lina, for setting this up and inviting me to this one of these sessions. Now, I'll make it quick, right? So one of the reasons, probably the key reasons for the establishment of the Southeast Asia Center of Asia Pacific Excellence is quite a mouthful, and I'm one of the few people who can actually pronounce this as if they are quite fluent. Even my staff can't do it that way. Now, one of the reasons for that is because the university system, for whatever reasons, has been challenged for many years in New Zealand, especially in the last 5 or 10 years thereabouts, right? So the reason is because we are producing, say, for example, graduates that can't find a job, right? Graduates that doesn't think about reality, right? So probably you can blame the academics for doing that, like teaching theories, teaching too much textbook stuff, and going back to history too long that you don't even look forward when you educate the new generation. So the university system has been challenged, and so. But then the university incentive system also doesn't allow the academics to do a lot of engagement because you know it's not incentivized to do that, right? I think some of you are from the universities, you can resonate with that. So you're asked to do research 40%, perhaps teaching 40%, and then do administration like I used to do, associate deans and whatever, chopping away permissions to do certain things. So academics don't do that, and then the education system fails. So the last government, the national government, set up this system. They call it the CAPES, right? The CAPES Center of Asia Pacific Excellence is almost like an engagement system. So what I find myself when I get asked to run this Southeast Asia CAPE is the fact that I get dissected into half, right? So it's like if you say, for example, if you live in New Zealand, there's always not enough people, right? The same can be said of Singapore, of course, for those of you who are living there in Singapore. But at the same time, which means that half of me is that professor and chair. The other half of me is almost like an administrator and a director of a center. Right. So I say, when you talk to me, I don't know which half you're talking to, but never mind, it doesn't matter. It's the same guy. So my left hand needs to talk to my right hand, but the center, what does the center do, right? So as I alluded to that, the misconnection between the education system and the real reality, right? So there are two things that the function of the CCAPE. Now, one of them is to try to bring the academic knowledge into the industry. So in other words, if you're an industry person, you come to the university, normally you knock on the door and say, can I get some help? And then you say, okay, how much money are you willing to pay, right? You can come to my course, but you pay this much money. So a lot of SMEs doesn't have that money. So the government says, okay, we need to have a system to allow the knowledge to be translated or to be transferred across. So they set up this for that one main reason. Now, the second reason for it, as I see it at least, right, is the fact that if we talk about business, then we are also talking about SMEs need help and who can they employ. If you cannot employ young educated, not just young educated, but also at the same time very highly skilled, for the market, right? Digital world, whatever world that we are talking about these days, then basically you're not helping them. So we try in CCAPE, we try to run activities that allow them, train them enough to be able to help businesses in our partnerships with businesses. So I partner, say, for example, with a lot of businesses, including those that are so-called businesses that are run by Maori descendant. Okay, so we do projects around, say, for example, food and nutrition space in the Southeast Asia zone. So there's a lot of these ideas about, how to New Zealand with a limited capacity of everything sells to Southeast Asia. So we do a lot of activities around this kind of engagement. We also do quite a lot of activities around digital and creative industries as well. Now, so for that reason, we support entrepreneurship, we support education, and in many ways, we also try to tie up the entrepreneurship with the markets. In other words, because of my head as the Southeast Asia director, I can't just say, look, guys, let's have some entrepreneurship and innovation, and regardless of which market you are going to sell, it doesn't matter, right? So where my remit sits, then we are looking for opportunities into the ASEAN region, right? To look into what are the opportunities for New Zealand entrepreneurship into the ASEAN region, and so we support that through a lot of activities around business engagement. In other words, for example, I just came back from a session. Which is why I'm still properly dressed from another event, whereby we actually host an event around digital and creative sectors opportunities in ASEAN. So in that, I have two speakers, two guest speakers. For example, one that has there is a CEO of a studio, and then the other person is actually an ex-New Zealand Trade Enterprise Trade Commissioner, to share some knowledge to not just students, actually to also the industry, about how Southeast Asia might play for the digital world. So we do quite a lot of tertiary things, but at the same time, we encourage them not just being good future employees, but also when they set up their companies, we do a lot of company visits to which they have to craft ideas to potential companies. So in this case, the projects that I'm doing with the digital world is around, sort of getting some potential internships into the Netflix or the Facebook or the Google, and some of them are actually stationed in Southeast Asia as well. So I think that's a quick one to respond to your question, TJ.
Thanks very much, Hwee, for introducing us to your center and what's happening really in New Zealand. And also, how do you see this the linkages evolving between New Zealand and ASEAN? And I guess what can we expect, in a post-pandemic recovery phase? Hwee?
Thanks, DJ. So I got probably a few bullet points, but I don't know whether they are necessarily connected. So just bear with me. I'll be like shooting a bit of darts everywhere. So now, the way I see it, right, is that if you look back to our conversations, broadly speaking, in this area, and some of you are from the university system, right? So when we do research about innovation, we don't necessarily mention the word entrepreneurship. And then some of us will do entrepreneurship, but nothing to do with innovation, right? And that's quite common. If you look around the world when it comes to publication in innovation journals, they are different from the entrepreneurship journals. Okay, and that's because of the way we promote it as if they are actually two distinct areas. Although I must say that, in some cases, I think entrepreneurship can be tied to, just being entrepreneurial in a sort of in a service gap rather than innovation. So your entrepreneurship doesn't rely on necessarily a very strong innovation. So I can see why the literature may have confounded the problem of understanding between entrepreneurship and innovation by treating them as if they are separate things. Now, then it's the same way we will confound individual entrepreneurs versus the small, medium enterprises as well. So that's how we get confused between we are talking about entrepreneurs or small, medium enterprises, or at least the sort of the small enterprises. So okay, let me put a setting right there, right? So then when it comes to the kind of linkages that we talk about, entrepreneurship and innovation between New Zealand and ASEAN. So last year, before actually COVID runs us all into Zoom, so I was in Jakarta. Of course, I was in ERIA as well, visiting Julia, and thanks for hosting us again, Julia. So I had a bunch of students from New Zealand's 7 universities, right? So because my center is a national center, so I must love every university student. So I cannot just love my university student, and then I could get into a big kind of a political problem right there between the universities. And also, just out of interest only, let me give you 2 seconds there. I was told that my business card cannot have like back-to-back, like, I got one business card that shows Victoria University, but I got a separate business card that shows my center directorship. So they are separate cards. I cannot have one card that has got 2 faces because of political reasons as well. So I brought those students there, but I also find that when they actually go there, they have a lot of good ideas because we select those students based on entrepreneurial ideas, and some of them have their own companies. One of them from Otago University has already got 2 startups right here in New Zealand. But when they all go there into those ASEAN markets like Jakarta, KL, and Singapore that we went there, the kind of scale, right? That means the scale and the kind of skills, right? The digital, especially the digital side of skills, are quite remarkably different. Right, so the students, when they go there, is almost like an eye opener. It's like, what, if we were to try to create something from here, there's no way we are going to be able to, sort of link it to those ASEAN markets, because that's not what they are doing there. Right, and I think part of the challenge is the way we sort of innovate. Sometimes a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs doesn't think, especially a lot of them actually right here in New Zealand. I'll say a bit more about that later on, around the fact that we innovate because we like some things, not because we actually like it to sell to some markets. Right, so some innovations are not necessarily prepared for market. Right, again, some entrepreneurship are not well versed in dealing with how the market might conceived, right, as to those products and services. So I can see that there's a lot of misconnect between New Zealand and ASEAN right there. But of course, all is not lost, right? That's why I create some of these programs to which we have industry partnerships. So just to give you a quick example as well, 2 weeks ago I was sort of traveling around the equivalent, not the equivalent of Jakarta, KL in Singapore, but we couldn't be there. So we actually decided that we will go to South Island, Nelson and Christchurch to do a replica of the Southeast Asia trip. Right, so what we did was the same concept again. So we went to a lot of these food-related industries, right, food and nutrition-related industry, because the scope there is talking about the food space in Singapore, right? So there was a focus in Singapore, more concentration around there, but also broadly looking into the ASEAN region as to what kind of New Zealand products or services around the food space, not just, like fruits or whatever. We're talking about plant food, plant-based food, food, very high nutrition kind of level of supplements and all sorts of things. So we visit a lot of these companies, and we actually have a lot of these master students who are from Master of Food Technology, and some of them join us, right? So we have only about 5 universities students who join me, about 15 of them join me to travel around to Nelson and Christchurch. And again, we have a lot of Zoom speakers coming out from the ASEAN region, like for example, the A staff from Singapore and so on and so forth. And we also have the New Zealand Trade Commissioners and HICOM that are based in Singapore, George Street, and they Zoom in as well. Now, we also have the equivalent of the Singapore High Commissioner in Wellington, Sudesh Mania, speaks to a student as well. So that's the kind of things that I can see them getting closer to each other, as in, how New Zealand and ASEAN connectivity can get closer and closer when it comes to, being sort of entrepreneurial and being also like innovate for each other, right? So you don't just innovate out of the blue and hope that somebody is going to pick it up and you become a billionaire overnight, but actually innovate in a sense for the market as well. Now, in terms of moving forward, right, in post-pandemic, I can only say that the landscape becomes more vicious, right? As in, there are more people who doesn't really have a lot of places to run around. So as a result of that, we all sit there and dream things, I'm not saying that we are going cuckoo, but I'm saying that, we are starting to dream of different, products to make and different opportunities that we can identify, right? So a lot more vicious, innovation and entrepreneurship around, in particular, the digital aspects of things, I must say, right? Even online selling and Uber and all these other things that will come through as a result of that. Logistics as well, right? The e-logistics market that is going around the world. So it'll be more vicious, but it's also, unfortunately, more of the opportunistic entrepreneurship, right? So in other words, a lot of entrepreneurship is just to exploit a certain gap and quickly get a lot of money, but doesn't have to sustain because it doesn't matter, right? So for some of them, they just create for that kind of reason. Now, in order to be able to sort of make the relationship and the ties stronger over time, right? So I do this thing that I, and Cheryl say that we are established. I'm not too sure that the CCAP is well established yet. We only sort of like a startup for 2-3 years, but I've already sort of journey-fied people or journey-fied organizations. Now, what do I mean by that? Just bear with me very quickly, right? So for example, those students who traveled with me about 2-3 weeks ago, so they went through a program which is the Tertiary Market Immersion Program. Unfortunately, we were immersed in New Zealand, but trying to link it to Southeast Asia, of course. Now, then last week they were in a session, right? So it's a journey, right? I try to put them into multiple points of engagement so that they are actually connected to the industry people as well as connected to other entrepreneurs, right? So that they can switch a lot of entrepreneurship minds. And because of the way I engage with the stakeholders, a lot of them are from Southeast Asia, right? So it exposed a lot of those students into the Southeast Asia region and the opportunities that comes out from it. So last week they were at this New Zealand Institute of International Affairs conference, to which the keynote speaker was none other than the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, right? Who, of course, did a political speech around Indo-Pacific, right? Which is around the sort of the importance of ASEAN to New Zealand in that particular speech. Now, and then earlier today, 3 of them or 4 of them actually joined me at the session that we had around the digital and creative industries, the opportunities for ASEAN, where we have the 2 business speakers, as I mentioned earlier on. So I'm trying to sort of like making the connectivity a lot more tighter by sending some individuals, but also some businesses. This is just an example of a group of students, but we also do that for the businesses as well. So we journey-fied them through multiple contact points, multiple activities, not just events, but multiple activities and multiple connectivity, so that the kind of ties between New Zealand and ASEAN are deeper, right? And with their appreciation over time, then basically you expect them to be sort of like strengthened, and I'm sure they won't stop themselves from jumping onto the plane to Southeast Asia at some point and do the real hardcore stuff, right? Walking on the street there. When the borders are actually open. So that's how we, I conceptualize how to prepare them, right, for the day when we actually all can meet properly in person. But nonetheless, the connectivity can be strengthened by all this journey that I put across there.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's my long answer to a short question. Sorry about that.